Welcome to ESVN, the Emma Sports Vigeland Network show. My name is Emma Vigeland. Hello, everybody. Remember to like this stream, subscribe to the channel, youtube.com/ESVN show. Put on push notifications so you know when this darn show is going live. Rate us 5 stars, all that good stuff. And say hello, and you better do it in the chat because he's responsible for keeping you all in line. Say hello to my co-host and producer, Bradley Alsop.
Good afternoon, everyone. Go New York, go New York, go.
Oh, yeah,
go New York, go New York, go.
Sorry for cutting you off. We should acknowledge that I asked Bradley to wear some Knicks paraphernalia today. I am as well. I'm not sure you can see. Little t-shirt here. Didn't want to do Suns Out, Guns Out fully, and I just couldn't find my Carmelo Anthony jersey.
Yeah, I'm rocking the Anthony Davis right now with the shirt underneath.
Oh, you are? Yeah. The basketball jersey is not the easiest to wear in public for my hockey jerseys. It's easy.
Yeah, like sweater.
You know when you go in, you're wearing a hockey jersey that it's gonna be like 50 degrees in there because of the ice, especially if you're closer. Which I was not last time I went. I was a little bit up in the nosebleeds. But that you're going to be comfortable in a hockey jersey pretty much.
I do the wrong thing. I wear them sometimes to bars. Like I wear my my Kyle Palmieri Devils jersey, which is
which we'll break out next week.
Yeah,
most likely.
Which is one, a relic because it was 8 years old and he's on the Islanders now. And two, I go out and I'm like, wow, I'm sweating profusely.
Yeah.
This is a little bit of a warm number I put on here.
It's also just absurd. Hockey jerseys are insanely expensive.
Oh, yeah.
Compared to other sports.
Absolutely.
Or sweaters, as they
Hockey
like
sweaters,
to call
excuse
them.
me. Yeah, sorry.
We will be talking about the NHL playoffs next week, which kicks off on Monday. The NBA playoffs kick off on Saturday, but the play-in is before that, which we've been open about how we don't like the play-in. I just wish that they would go through 1 through 8 because it doesn't disincentivize tanking as we saw with the Mavericks. Should we just start there?
Oh yeah, sure.
Look,
yeah.
I mean, we're wearing
a little sad.
We're wearing Knicks gear, so you guys know where our allegiances lie. However, it wasn't just Knicks fans who own the Mavericks first round pick, but it's top 10 protected, that were upset with whatever the hell happened over the weekend with what the Mavs did, resting 5 of their starters, including Luka Doncic, until just after the first quarter. He didn't play because it was Slovenia night, and essentially saying we don't want to make the play-in, because if they won that game, they were likely to make the play-in. They opted to go into the draft instead, most likely, although there's still an opportunity for that pick to fall out of the top 10 and go to the Knicks. But still, they gave a middle finger. Mark Cuban flipped off Adam Silver and said, we don't want to be in this tournament. It's worthless for us. We would rather be in the Wembanyama sweepstakes and have a top 10 pick potentially. That's the most likely outcome for them at this point in this stacked draft than be a part of the play-in tournament, which the NBA has said is there to disincentivize tanking, when frankly, I just think that they want another bite at the apple on these lucrative TV deals where they can do the play-in games. They can sell tickets to play-in games and give a majority of the teams in the NBA and their respective fan bases the shiny idea that your team could make it too, even though obviously realistically, like the Chicago Bulls and the Atlanta Hawks, neither of those teams are going to the NBA finals, but they're selling that dream to their fan base. I don't see in theory anything wrong with it, except that it's been 2 years since COVID that the play-in has been in effect, and we're seeing right now it's more valuable for the Mavericks to stay out than to win and be in, which is a problem for the NBA.
Yeah, I guess it doesn't, regardless of like the circumstances. Someone in the YouTube chat saying Dallas still would have been 11 if they won. OKC controlled the destiny, and also Mavs lost because of the tiebreaker for picks. Which, like, be that as it may, even if that is the case, I still think it sends a bad message where on the last game of the season, a nominally competitive team who
Gotcha.
traded away.
I didn't know that
Yeah,
OKC parts. Thank you for the
but yes,
correction, chat.
air
Yes.
tweet 123. Thank you for that. That's insightful. Um, the but with that being said, even I just think the idea optically of like this team clearly making a move at the near the trade deadline to supposedly fortify their team with a bigger like a greater scoring option in Kyrie Irving to like to me that's you can't look at that and be like, oh yeah, that's a long-term move. That's a move specifically designed to potentially give a jump start or a shot in the arm to a team that may have needed it offensively. In doing so, of course, what we've quibbled with is you sent away
They're
gutted
their defensive
right.
players.
You sent away your basically third scoring option in Spencer Dinwiddie and your best perimeter defender in Dorian Finney-Smith, but at the same time, you're not making that move to like mortgage for your future. So then to still sort of potentially, given whatever might have happened with OKC, to go into this final game of the season against the Bulls. Like the Bulls are also a playing team. They weren't playing the Kings. They weren't playing
who were also
the Nuggets.
resting guys.
Right, who were also not operating at full strength because they were waiting to go into the play-in.
Yes.
Like to go into that circumstance with Kyrie Irving not playing and Luka coming in for a few minutes in the first quarter and then sitting out the entire rest of the game, being up double digits at halftime and then losing, it's really hard to stomach that, I think, if I were a fan of the team. And also, it's hard to look at that and not think, could they have tried harder? Could they have competed a little bit more? Could there have been more of a role for them in terms of remaining competitive and staying competitive into the last game of the season? Because no team is ever going to admit that they were rolling over for draft purposes. I think it's almost like illegal to do that. But
well,
like,
they're under investigation. They
right.
Can't, because Jason Kidd, when asked about it, said, "Do you agree with this?" And he said, "Well, my bosses do, so I have to." Basically, I'm paraphrasing, but that was what he said.
So I just sort of feel like as you said, of course, like I think this warrants, or at least the NBA felt incumbent upon itself to investigate this, because I don't really know how you could have been this team for the last, since January, and then all of a sudden, the last few weeks of the season basically seemed to like throw in the towel far more than you were at the trade deadline when you traded key pieces for Kyrie Irving,
which everyone saw was a bad idea at the time. It remained a bad idea. They fell apart defensively towards the end of the season with both Kyrie and Luka playing. They had just like a dismal record, 2-9, 1-8. I don't know off the top of my head, but it was bad. And then they ended up just blatantly tanking. Pull up this ESPN stats thing here, Bradley, if you could. Please. Because I'm very polite. Because they didn't just tank in terms of not putting their players out on the field or on the court. They tanked in actuality. The Mavericks got blocked on a three-pointer, airballed a three-pointer, and hit the backboard on a three-pointer at the end of their loss to the Bulls tonight. They are the first team over the last 10 seasons to fail to hit the rim on 3 three-point attempts inside the final 15 seconds of a game. You cannot tell me that that was not on purpose. It was obvious, and the NBA isn't looking into it because, and this point was made on ESPN earlier. I'm trying to give credit to the pundit who said it on ESPN, although not that they need my credit on anything. Tim Bontemps said that this is really just about the NBA getting embarrassed. It's not about teams tanking because they do that all the time. It's the fact that this happened with the play-in tournament on the line, they potentially being able to get in, the NBA wanting to make the play-in tournament a thing, and I also think it affects them because of who is on the Dallas Mavericks. Like, this wasn't OKC doing the same thing, or another team that has a larger or a smaller attraction to it and makes fewer headlines. This was the team with Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic, one of the 3 best young players in the NBA, who is incredibly marketable for the NBA. So the fact that he was sitting sulking on the sidelines, looking pissed, and clearly being forced to participate because what ownership wants a better chance in the draft, it was a bad look for the NBA generally.
I think that's more. I think that's primarily it in the sense because like you're right, and what I mean that in the sense that like you know the Rockets exist, the Pistons exist. Like there are teams that tank and transparently tank. Like the Blazers usually like to see the lineups that the Portland Trailblazers were putting out to end the season were some guys I've never even really heard of.
Yeah.
I mean, Skylar Mays, Drew Eubanks, and Jonathan Williams, I think his name is.
I don't know.
It's these are like no disrespect to these guys because I love random NBA players. So I'm really not trying to be critical of them in particular, but like they could have been like 2K my player people for all we're concerned because Anthony Simons, Damian Lillard, Yusuf Nurkic, none of those guys were playing.
Right.
There are teams like where that they are not trying to be competitive and win games. The Mavericks did not completely comport themselves like that, like the Rockets or like the Pistons. We weren't going into this thinking, oh yeah, like they're definitely tanking. But something did shift clearly. Like and as you said, it's a matter of optics, and optics I don't think is it might seem like an aesthetic concern, but optics for sports leagues are extremely important, or almost paramount. Like if a team that is supposed to be competitive with one of the best players who for a lot of the season could have been considered, or maybe even is still considered. I mean, I would say an All NBA, but maybe not MVP, but in the top 5 or 7 players being considered for MVP, along with Kyrie Irving, one of the most marketable players in the game, even a bit obviously, controversy notwithstanding, but I'm saying
arguably
recognizable.
The best player under 25 in the NBA. Right? How about that?
For Luka?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. And Kyrie, just in terms of name recognition, like fame, like it is not good for the NBA for this team with those two players to be seen as kind of punting on a attempt to be the 8th seed or make it into the postseason.
Hey, so Adam Silver just stripped the protection. The Knicks just get the first round pick regardless of what it is.
Yeah, I think that's
the only fair solution.
I really think that if Adam Silver wanted to bring some legitimacy to this process and kind of restore the sanctity of the NBA after what happened here, the pick should be ours.
I agree.
And Victor Wembanyama should be immediately
We need
signed
to restore faith in our institutions.
And this after in these trying times, in these uncertain times, we need to restore faith in our democracy and faith in the sanctity of the NBA. And so, Victor Wembanyama, come on down.
Please, sir. I will say one more final thing. To see Frank Ntilikina out on the floor getting those minutes in the final, first of all, you're wearing the true number 11.
That's right, of Frankie Knuckles.
It's like, I don't know why I can't quit him. He's just not, like, he never put it together offensively, but he was one of the sweetest, kindest Knicks ever to put on the uniform, and was such a draft bust for us. And every season I kind of went into it still believing, like, Frankie Smokes, he's going to be able to put it together offensively, and it just never happened.
He earnestly is like a genuinely good defender. It's just the unfortunate thing is when you spend a pick on that, you hope he can like hit the broadside of a barn.
And he just can't shoot.
He just simply can't shoot. He's almost unplayable offensively.
That's just like completely not something that works in the modern NBA where your point guard can't shoot.
It was the same thing, but slightly different in terms of like skill set with Kevin Knox, where we were like, he's incredibly athletic and can jump out of the gym. He literally does not know what to do with the basketball in his hands.
Yeah, I'll admit, I was all in that.
Me too. I was
like, for the upside.
100. I was like, the ceiling is the roof on Kevin Knox, and I was like, well, he actually. I'm not certain he's familiar with the game of basketball.
Yeah, right.
Upon further review, I'm not sure he knows the rules of the game.
All right, let's just talk NBA playoffs then here. While we have it. So let's just pull up the matchups that we've got and the bracket, because there's some really interesting matchups this NBA playoff. In terms of the schedule, so the play-in starts tomorrow. Oh shoot, is that image like kind of that's my fault. Let me just send you the website while we do this. Yeah, just go just search. This is great.
Distract the audience.
distract the audience. NBA, I got that graphic from NBA.com. It's the NBA playoff picture thing. So here we go. So the play-in starts tomorrow, which is Tuesday, if you're watching this later. And let's just start, I guess, with the play-in matchups, and then we can go through this. But here's the bracket that we've got. So, oh, gosh, my eyesight's terrible. Why don't I ever wear my glasses? Okay, so for the West, Denver first seed, obviously, Grizzlies second seed. The set matchups that we do know in the West are going to be Phoenix Suns versus the Clippers and the Kings versus the Warriors. And the Warriors' odds are shockingly really good in that matchup. We can talk about that given their road struggles. But let's start with the play-in, and then in terms of the East, Milwaukee with the first seed, Boston with the second seed. Then you got Philly facing off against the Nets, who are now without their two superstars, and Cleveland versus the Knicks, which I think independently is a really interesting matchup outside of course, our vested interest in the Knicks winning. But let's break down some of the play-in stuff. You can take that off there just to give people a sense. But Hawks versus Heat. What's your initial read on that, Bradley? Because for me, this seems like a terrible matchup for the Hawks, both in record and just in terms of team competence. Like, I'm a Jimmy Butler fan. I think he's kind of an old school superstar, or star in a way. I love his consistency. And the Heat are not who they were, but they have a lot of veteran experience on that team. They got Kevin Love mid-season. I mean, that doesn't move the needle a ton. But, like, at the very least, veteran presence. The Heat seem completely unwieldy, and they also don't have a good record against Miami.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think the Heat certainly, obviously just based on record and based on playoff seeding, were better and more dynamic last year when they not only made it to the conference finals against the Celtics but did push them to 7 games. But I think the reason why I still definitely have more confidence in them going into this play-in game against the Hawks is for that very reason, in terms of who was the X factor in those 7 games last year, and that's still Jimmy Butler. Because Jimmy Butler, regardless of win or lose in terms of the playoff series, he's shown himself to be a pretty electric and pretty clutch player in the playoffs. He had a really amazing shot in the final seconds, I think, of Game 1 of last year's conference finals to beat the Celtics. Like, he's no stranger to big moments, and I think he's also, just in terms of like a guy who, I'm not even necessarily saying that he's underrated, because he is one of probably the top in the top 15, top 20 best players in the league, easily. But he's a guy that can really take over a game on both ends of the floors, get key steals, lock down guys on the perimeter at the point of attack. As well as, basically, in terms of shot selection and shot difficulty, he can make a lot of shots from a lot of areas on the floor and with very little space required.
Right.
So this Hawks defense is not particularly foreboding to me, I would say. And also, this is a little bit more intangible than actually the product on the floor, but I'm not super confident in the Hawks' ability to withstand any sort of adversity. I think there have been some obvious, clear chemistry issues with Trae Young leading to the ouster of Nate McMillan. Quinn Snyder came in the middle of this season to kind of shepherd them to be able to get to this point in the season. I don't think this team is necessarily, I don't think they're bad or anything like that. I think they have a floor of, I think, with relatively competent play. Trae, for all of his real defensive liabilities, which I think will be kind of one of the key matchups and key dynamics that Eric Spoelstra, the Heat coach, and the Heat themselves will try to exploit consistently. I think they're going to try to make every switch on Trae Young a difficult one. So I think one of the big responsibilities that Snyder and the Hawks will have is being able to mask Trae on defense so they can get the most out of him on the other end with 3-point shooting and with the way he can pass. But I think if he's neutralized in any way on defense, where he's being sort of targeted and successfully targeted.
They don't have a release valve outside of that.
That's the issue that I think may arise, where they're going to need another person on that team to step up offensively if Trey gets into foul
Murray,
trouble.
but yeah, right.
But in the sense that Murray is really going to need to step up. DeAndre Hunter, Bogdan Bogdanovic are really going to have to be crucial in this game, I think, to make it show that it's not just the Trae Young show, good and bad, in the sense of the Trae Young show where Trae completely takes over on offense with no other assistance, or he's getting really targeted on defense, and the Heat make the most of that, because it doesn't really matter who is on the Heat in terms of, like, and what I mean by that is they can input a lot of different guys of varying sizes, strengths, skills, and that scheme offensively and defensively, due to Eric Spoelstra and the coaching staff, is so unbelievably sound and so dangerous that they make the most out of guys who don't necessarily come from the largest of pedigrees. Gabe Vincent, Caleb Martin, Max Strus, now even Haywood Highsmith is like a plus reserve for them. There's basically very, even now, of course, Udonis Haslem aside, who, retired, had a fantastic, fun last game of his regular season career. He's not seeing the floor in the play-in game, I promise you that. They don't really have a weak link. So in terms of, like, someone that's super, super exploitable. So I think that the Hawks will have their work cut out for them, but it's just a matter of them being able to diversify the offense a little bit and hide Trae Young on defense.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only way that they win is if Trae Young takes over, and I just don't really see that happening.
And if Trae Young takes over with enough support, because DeJounte Murray has had some truly has had some good games for the Hawks, but I don't think this fit has entirely congealed yet after a full season. Right. I don't know if that compatibility is completely locked in. I think, and of course, and I'm not even saying that necessarily it's a failure.
Trae Young seems like he struggles to play complementary basketball.
Right, and I think that's such a key component, is that if you are going to add a piece like DeJounte Murray, the key, at least for me, in terms of them being successful in going forward in the postseason, is Trae needs to make the most of his possessions off ball. He needs to cut. He needs to be in the right place at the right time. He needs to be able to just be there for catch and shoot threes that Murray is either generating, or if he can, or off a rebound, for example, from Clint Capella or something like that. When he is not the center of gravity, he still needs to be as effective as when he is. And that's, I think, going to be the key for them going forward. If that happens, I think they can really make this competitive. I just think I just think the Heat, broadly, in terms of organizationally, schematically, and in terms of what comes out on the floor, are just better prepared for this moment.
The better system. Well, okay, so then we've got the Lakers versus the Wolves as well. Preview there. A lot of people think that the Lakers are going to actually step up and win this one. They've been red hot recently. The Timberwolves are obviously going through some drama because of Rudy Gobert punching Kyle Anderson and then getting suspended. So Gobert will not be playing in this game.
I would just like to talk about this for 1 second.
Yeah.
Rudy Gobert is such a moron.
He's an asshole.
I don't know. I just want to take a few seconds to just dedicate some time to both Gobert as well as this particular circumstance, because so of course we know Gobert is the guy who, after as COVID swept the NBA, was the guy who jokingly touched all of the microphones, and then ultimately him and Donovan Mitchell contracted COVID, and the season ended in March of 2020. So we kind of know Rudy to be a little bit of like a facetious bastard. Like he doesn't take a lot of things seriously. He's kind of a dick. Like, and also that is also combined with a hysterical amount of disrespect towards him as like a star in the league, in the sense that he gets no really, I would say, beneficial calls towards him. He's not really respected by like all NBA, or like, he's obviously one defensive player of the year, but like, I just think it's interesting, like, compare, like, if he were anybody else, you'd think that he would get more respect than he does, but because it kind of is who he is personally, and I find him like,
I don't think anyone likes him.
Like, that's what I'm saying, is like,
problem.
there's no one that wants to like reward Rudy Gobert for his quality of play, because of, I think, who he is personally and what he's kind of shown himself to be, and also seeing how much those pieces that the Jazz received in return and how much they've performed and how well they performed despite not making the playoffs. Like Walker Kessler truly making a case for Rookie of the Year while there has been this rancor and discord on the Timberwolves side of things has only further exacerbated that dynamic. So going into this particular moment where Gobert took a swing at Kyle Anderson in the huddle and got sent home is just so funny that I don't know if you saw this, but the day before, an either story in ESPN or The Athletic came out where Kyle Anderson was interviewed or profiled, and he was talking, and he apparently has a blunt sense of motivation or a blunt way of motivating his teammates.
Yes.
And Gobert said something along the lines of like, you know, he can be harsh and he can be critical and he can be intense in the huddle, but I think that's just because of how competitive he is and how much he wants to win, and I don't take it personally. Literally not 12 hours later, he's trying to punch the guy in the huddle.
He took it very personally.
Because he's so upset about what went on. So I don't think the vibes going into this game are particularly good for the Timberwolves because we're not even discussing how after that, Jaden McDaniels, in
broke
frustration, walked into the tunnel, punched a wall, and fractured his hand.
Yeah.
So things are not looking great for the Timberwolves going into the play-in game. However, they did ultimately win the game based off some real great heroics from Anthony Edwards on the other end of the floor, on both ends of the floor. He blocked the shot, went over, turned the ball over, got it back, and went for an and-one to beat the Pelicans. So it ultimately did work out in the sense that they were able to clinch that game. They're in the play-in. I think this is a very interesting matchup because it's two teams that I could either see firing on all cylinders or like massively fucking up this chance.
Well, that's the thing. So, I mean, to put a button on it, I think that the Lakers are probably going to win. But you also, when you have these emotional swings, especially if Gobert's not playing,
right,
that's really hard to calculate for. So they could all rally behind Kyle Anderson, who by all accounts is the leader in that locker room. Anthony Edwards could go Super Saiyan or whatever the kids say. So like, I mean, I would probably bet on the Lakers in this matchup, but I don't feel comfortable about it. I feel way more comfortable about the Heat than I do about the Lakers.
And it's interesting because the Lakers, to their great credit, I mean, from January, where they were kind of circling the drain and in the 13 seed, made some real efforts to shore up some real deficiencies they had in terms of shooting and playmaking by, you know, making the trade to get D'Angelo Russell, Malik Beasley, Jared Vanderbilt, Rui Hachimura. Like they've done genuinely good work to make this team much more functional around LeBron and around Anthony Davis. And with LeBron and AD back, they definitely have made it so where I can actually see a coherence and a style of play, which when it was Russell Westbrook was still in the fold and Anthony Davis was out, it was hard to even understand what specifically they were trying to do on the floor.
This is a lot more coherent, and we had a caller kind of check us when we were making fun of the Lakers a little bit because it seemed like they were shuffling the deck chairs on the Titanic.
Absolutely.
But for the short term, in terms of a patchwork, this seemed like this is a decent option. We got to get to the next matchup.
No, but I agree. But I think ultimately, if I had to choose just based on the rancor and based on kind of the recency of what's going in, I would probably take the Lakers.
Yes. I think so. I agree with you there. Okay, Bulls versus Raptors. Who are we taking here?
Yeah, this is a weird one.
This kind of is a yucky matchup.
Yeah, this is a weird one because I both don't think the vibes or the state of play for the Bulls are particularly nice, both aesthetically and narratively, like in the sense, like I don't think the basketball they've been playing is kind of disgusting. I think what it frustrates me about the Bulls in particular is that they expended a lot of resources to get DeMar DeRozan, Nikola Vucevic, and Zach LaVine on the same team. This was not a team that was like, we're sort of putting our chips into the middle of the table. This was their shot. This was their intention, that this is going to be our nucleus to be a playoff team. And it just has not meshed, and it has only been completely exacerbated by the locus for them and the glue that they've been missing, which is Lonzo Ball, and his distribution ability and his playmaking ability, and which does not seem to have any end in sight, unfortunately, because it just seems like his ankle injury has been aggravated multiple times to the tune of even more surgeries after
sad.
the initial prognosis.
Yes.
So it's been a tough road for them to even be at the 10 seed here. And I don't necessarily think they have enough juice or enough kind of dynamism or ingenuity to get past the Raptors, while also have been pretty disappointing relative to how I thought they were going to play earlier in the season. It's a similar argument with the Heat for me here, in the sense that Nick Nurse has such a specific and ingrained style of play with who he has on the floor. It's Fred VanVleet is the floor general, then 4 to 5 like General Grievous from Star Wars guys who have like 8-foot long limbs and play shapeless, positionless basketball and can rebound the ball and hopefully make a few shots while locking down on defense.
Right.
And they've had a little bit more of a defensive miscommunication problem than they have had in recent years, and Scotty Barnes has not been as dynamic or as impactful as he was in his Rookie of the Year season, which is leading them obviously to have a 500 record relative to what they had last year when they kind of did pose a little bit more of a challenge to the 76ers in the playoffs last year. But I still think if I'm thinking about this system, this coach with Pascal Siakam, Fred VanVleet, Scotty Barnes, OG Anunoby, I'm still probably thinking that they're going to have a better team philosophy and better team strategy going into this game. I would be pretty surprised if the Bulls pulled this one out.
Me too. I think I feel really good about the Raptors because really, honestly, just same reasons, veteran leadership and home record. The Raptors have been very good at home and they will host this playoff
game. And that
game.
Is not a particularly habitable environment for away. The Raptors have a pretty good faithful.
Yeah. So I that's where my mind goes. And then last play-in matchup that we have right now, Pelicans versus the Thunder. Like again, I mean, Zion just it's falling apart. Can't play.
This one is interesting to me because
I like
of
the Pelicans. But...
Yeah, this one's kind of interesting to me because I'm like, obviously because of what has been going on with Zion Williamson, very much kind of just trying to approach this team without even like kind of factoring him into the equation, because like at this point, it pains me to say this because there's very few players in the NBA who I like to see play more than Zion Williamson. I really like, he's one of the most like unique athletes I've ever seen, but he can't stay on the floor, and he's never been able to stay on the floor. And there's been no definitive answers about what the prognosis of the sort of nebulous injury that he's recovering from.
Right.
So you kind of have
just
to approach
wait
this
on the joints.
Right.
That's what it's going to be.
You have to kind of approach this game as being like, at their best, what can CJ McCollum and Brandon Ingram and their pretty good supporting cast of guys, like Herb Jones, who again, similar to Scotty Barnes, has not been nearly as effective as he was last year. He's still an amazing perimeter defender, but his 3-point percentage has dropped precipitously from last year. So he's not been as reliable of a catch and shoot threat as he was last year. But Trey Murphy is still being able to fill that role and of kind of being a reliable knockdown shooter. So if he can stay hot, if Brandon Ingram and CJ McCollum can be the kind of fulcrum of that offense, I think they could take advantage a little bit of the youth of this Thunder team. But this Thunder team is very entertaining and a very fun watch. And I don't think they're going to take this matchup lying down. If the key to this is going to be the Pelicans being able to stop the Thunder's A, transition offense, but B, to control the pace of the game. The Thunder are one of if not maybe the youngest team in the league. They basically, I think, have an average age of like 20, 21 years of age across the board.
Right. I mean, which is did you know that this was the first time in franchise history that the Thunder have made the playoffs for the first time in 2 consecutive seasons, and it's because they expanded it to the play-in.
Oh, yeah.
But isn't that amazing, given the talent that they used to have on that team?
And also
with Durant, with Harden, with Russ, with Westbrook. I mean, like, that's unreal.
It's interesting to even consider that although it has been, their history is relatively recent, the iterations of those teams, like you said, the big three in OKC, which woefully never won a title, but then also the Westbrook Paul George years, where they were still pretty competitive,
right?
And But now this is a totally new look. Young coach Mark Dagnall has really found something with these guys. Jalen Williams, the Jalen with a Jal, not Jay. There are two Jalen Williams. There are two Jalen's William on the on the Thunder. And he is a fantastic point guard, really fun player, kind of a dark horse rookie of the year candidate for me. Josh Giddey has kind of found his rhythm as both a fantastic passer and he can and an offensive scorer as well, along with some kind of guys that you wouldn't necessarily see as super heralded. Isaiah Joe, Nick Wiggins, Andrew's brother, and with the center of gravity obviously being Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who is truly one of the most unique scorers in the league.
Absolutely.
Like a guy who is kind of one of one in what he's able to do on the floor, and it's almost hard to even think about whether he could be like complimentary to anyone else. Like this is kind of a perfect role for him. So I think they're a really exciting team, but they're also ahead of schedule. Yeah. They're super young. So if they don't win this game, like I don't think it's I don't think it's a super foreboding for anything bad in their future. I think it's just if the Pelicans can control the pace and their guys, Brandon Ingram, CJ McCollum, can get on the board in a serious way, they'll win this game. So, I think it's pretty open and shut there, honestly.
We're taking all of the home teams.
I think it makes sense because there's.
I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like again, the play-in. I really wish this wasn't the way that it's structured, but that's like it does give these teams that are at home a bit of an advantage. But then if that's the case, then I wish that they would just cut it off at 8 and then have every team have 4 or 5 days rest before they're in this playoff crunch.
But I will say, just as a slight aside, given my analysis there, of the 4, I think the Thunder have the best shot to win in New Orleans.
I agree.
I think the other 3 are more open and shut in terms of the home court advantage. If anyone's going to win a home game there, I think it's going to be OKC.
Which is shocking because OKC has a really bad, I think they only won 16 games on the road this year, but I just think in terms of the matchup, and they can have.
I just think they're hungry for it.
Take over the game too, potentially, which would be a legendary performance.
Oh, it would be amazing.
Yeah,
and they're hungry for it. Like Jalen Williams literally posted on his Instagram story when they qualified for the play-in. The video of Patrick Beverley when the Timberwolves won the play-in, he jumped up on the stands and ripped his shirt off and threw it into the crowd.
Contrast that with what's going on with the Mavericks organization.
Right. It's
now.
They're excited to be there. They want to be there and they want to win. They want to be competitive in this game. I think that matters. They're excited to go in and do this.
Yeah. All right. So with that, let's talk actual playoff teams here.
Yeah.
Because good analysis there, Bradley. Thank you. I always rely on you for your encyclopedic basketball knowledge.
Oh, my pleasure.
Here we go. We have the bet. Let's put up the odds from DraftKings.
Okay,
These are the odds for all of the teams currently in theoretically in position to win the NBA championship. Although we know that there's probably only 5 teams that could do it. If I'm guessing off the top of my head, 5 or 6. The with the play-in matchup set, those teams are technically included, including the Lakers being there with what is that? The 7th best odds to win the NBA championship. That seems completely wrong, but I guess they're banking on veteran experience there. Same with the Warriors at plus 950. What stands out for you there, Bradley, as a team that has so the Bucks have the best odds, then the Celtics. By the way, I'm just thrilled that none of those short-sighted calls to realign the NBA outside of East versus West, because the West was so stacked at the time, none of that ever came to fruition because now it's the East that's probably a bit stronger.
Oh, absolutely. And going into this home stretch, I think if I'm not mistaken, if I'm remembering this correctly, the parity was so strong in the Western Conference that the 4 through 10 seeds were separated by 3 games.
Yeah, it was very top.
Basically after the Nuggets, Kings, and Grizzlies, it was a complete bloodbath. Yeah. So you're absolutely right. That realignment happened pretty seamlessly. Where now kind of the Titans of the league are the Bucks, the Celtics, and the Sixers.
Exactly.
It did not stay in that that realm of just all West all the time. And Which I think is also good for the league because the Kings now ascended and are like an amazing story and have not been competitive in the Western Conference, or at least a playoff contender since like 2006.
Yeah, although they're being disrespected in these odds here. I mean, let's back up.
I completely agree. The fact
plus
that
8,000.
Yeah, because here's my issue.
Well, hold on. Like, before we dive into it, let me, for podcast listeners, I want to read through the odds
go
so
ahead,
people know. The Bucks are first at plus 265, then the Celtics at plus 320. Then the Suns at plus 425, which is interesting given the fact that like they are the 4 seed in the West. But I guess they're banking on the fact that Durant, when he has been healthy, I believe the Suns are undefeated when he's been healthy and playing since that trade.
The Suns.
Yes.
Yep.
So that's what they're banking on. And like maybe they've kind of just been keeping him in an incubator for the postseason. Then the Sixers at plus 900, which is tempting to me too, given the level that Embiid is playing at. The Warriors at plus 950, I don't get that at all. That seems like a betting, given the Warriors' dismal away record. I don't see how that's sustainable in the playoffs. They're 5th best odds. Then the Nuggets at plus 1100 with the 6th best odds, also very tempting to me.
Because I would not have expected the Nuggets. Honestly, even with the recency bias of the Warriors being the defending champs, I still would have thought the Nuggets would have been lower than the Warriors there.
Yeah. Like lower odds, better odds.
Yeah, like I'm pretty amazed that the Nuggets, even as the 1 seed, are still being are ranked lower in Vegas here. Than the Warriors. I mean, with DraftKings than the Warriors are. I'm obviously, like you said, I'm curious what the other books might say, but even here, I'm kind of surprised that they're getting 200 plus 200 from the Warriors there.
Yeah, I agree. Then the Lakers, again, 7th best odds at they're a play-in team, so they're the first play-in team here but they're a play-in team that
over
has
the Grizzlies.
7th best odds over the Grizzlies. We're plus 2,000. The Clippers, then, I guess that's 9th, plus 4,000. Then the Cavs, plus 4,000. The Kings, plus 8,000. We're getting into territory where none of these teams are going to win. Our Knicks at plus 14,000. So if you bet $10 on the Knicks, you'd win $1,400, right? That's the odds. I'm sorry for asking you to do math. We can figure that out later.
For the Knicks.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, they're not going to win the championship, so I'd be happy with
might be some good action.
them just to win this round. Then the Heat, then the Wolves, then the Hawks, and the Raptors, and the Nets, and the Pelicans, and the Thunder, and the Chicago Bulls.
Oh, plus 10,000.
Yeah, I mean, OKC and the Bulls have the same odds actually. So that's no, plus 100,000.
Oh, sorry, not 10,000, 100,000. Okay, got it. Right.
So I guess if you, that would be completely burning your money. But I mean, God, why don't I know how to do math off the top of my head, even though I do gamble?
We'd really be living in bizarro world if like the Thunder or the Bulls made the finals.
I mean, yeah, maybe everyone gets COVID for also for 3 months, except for the Bulls and the Thunder. But okay, so let's just start with what stands out there. I mean, I said I like the Nuggets right there. I mean, they have the best record in the West, and they have the 5th best odds to win the championship. So, or 6th best odds. That seems quite low. But I guess they're banking on the fact that the Nuggets have been a great regular season team for the past few years, haven't gotten it done in the playoffs.
Which I think is what I agree with you. I think is probably emblematic of the undersell here, but I think that's not taking. I could obviously be proven wrong once these series start, but I think this isn't taking into account that like this is not the team from last year that lost in the first round.
Right.
Like this is a team with Jamal Murray at full strength playing some really good basketball, and easily Michael Porter Jr. playing his best season of basketball in terms of like a full sample size of a season, having one of the best 3-point shooting years. Like he I think it can't be understated how crucial that is to their ecosystem as a team, and with the fact that they've been able to fill out the team too with really, really key and impactful role players like Bruce Brown, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and now Thomas Bryant in the Lakers trade from them.
Right. So I mean, I that's why I think they're a more complete team, and they have a much easier path in the West than other teams would. So I
Right,
think that
right.
they're a pretty safe bet if you want to throw, 10 bucks on it. Not advocating for gambling, just saying something that I would do. But it's also just a helpful analysis for to look at the NBA. But
I have two kind of hot takes though about some of these odds.
okay,
Um, I think the Suns are way. I think we're giving way too much credit
I
to Phoenix
agree.
based off a really, really small sample size.
Do you think that
I,
we're giving too much credit to the Celtics who have not been as dominant as of late as their record might
if
suggest?
I were to shuffle this a little bit, instead of it being Milwaukee, Boston, Phoenix, Philly, Golden State, I would have it as Milwaukee, Philly,
Mm-hmm.
Milwaukee, Philly, Denver, Golden State, Phoenix.
Right.
And the reason I say that is because sure, they've been 8-0 since with Kevin Durant playing, but Durant has played 8 games and he injured himself in a warm-up before his home opener. Like I don't know how completely reliable our faith can be, and I don't want this. I'm just saying based on what we've seen, Durant is 34 coming off 2 really really significant
Injuries and Chris
surgical
Paul.
procedures and injuries and Chris Paul also is in his late 30s as well and not getting any younger and could potentially and even did have a health concern in the playoffs last year. And so I'm not super confident necessarily the durability of the Suns, which is really, really important. And of course, Devin Booker is phenomenal, and he could potentially be a spark plug to carry them. But I think through a few rounds potentially. But I don't think it's enough if you can't get all of Kevin Durant, all of if not the best liquid scorer of all time,
Yeah.
as well as the best floor general of all time, if they're not fully healthy. So it's hard for me to put that stock into them over over the fully healthy Nuggets, the fully healthy Sixers, and also,
But do you like them ahead of the Grizzlies? I mean, the Grizzlies.
yes, because I think Brandon Clark and Steven Adams both
I was about
being
to
out
say,
is really, really devastating.
that must have moved the odds significantly.
Because as much as I think, listen, Steven Adams is not a particularly great scorer, but he's I think potentially the best defensive rebounder in the entire league, and the only other person who might have been close in terms of rebounding is Brandon Clark.
Yeah.
Like the simple cleanup work that makes that offense and defense hum goes through those two guys, and not having them and having to go further down into the rotation to put a lot of that workload on guys like Xavier Tillman and Santi Aldama and John Conchar, like that's tough. That's a really tough sell. And listen, the Grizzlies, to their great credit, they're also a really well-coached team. So I think the next man up mentality, they signed Kenny Lofton Jr., who was the G League MVP. He had 45 points in his first game after getting signed to the roster. I'm sure they can get a lot out of a little in terms of the pedigree of these guys, kind of similar to the Heat. But I think it's going to be tough if there is any way that Jaren Jackson Jr. get neutralized, and it becomes the Desmond Bane Dylan Brooks show. That is going to be hard, and they've been tested before, and the Warriors beat them pretty handily.
Right.
So I wonder, without even the resources they had last year in the playoffs, can they get farther than they did?
Yeah.
It's hard. It's a hard sell for me given the Clark and Adams injuries, and which sucks because I want to see this team at full strength perform.
In terms of super, let's put this back up for a sec. In terms of super long odds, what do you think is the best value here? Is it the Kings?
I think it's the Kings.
Yeah, it's
honestly.
Gotten more than the Knicks. Yes,
Totally.
more.
Because
the Knicks have the depth. They just don't have the top end star power on the same level as some of these other teams.
Because
the Knicks' depth is why I think they're going to win the series.
Totally. I think it's
they're underdogs. That's my. I mean, I placed $20 on the Knicks winning the series.
So I think I feel one of two ways about the Kings Warriors and the Heat Cavs series, which the first one is my hot take about the Kings Warriors series, which is, as much as I totally see it, because you're right, the Warriors have an absolutely dismal away record relative to their home record, and they will not have the home court advantage like they did last year. So going into Sacramento, a team that is not, I wouldn't even just say hungry, ravenous
for
playoff success. It's going to be around the clock coverage, around the clock pandemonium in Sacramento for their first playoff series.
Little brother syndrome. In the sense.
Exactly,
the
in Northern
have
California.
Dominated
Absolutely.
the region. I mean, look, that is. I think they're not. I don't think they're going to win the championship. But in terms of odds that are better value, if you really want to take a flyer,
I would do it.
I would, yeah.
But my concern with the Kings potentially winning is that, in spite of it, you're going up against it's the least seasoned team in terms of the postseason, going up against the most seasoned team, and the Warriors are that team where it's like they're Chiefs like in the sense of like they sometimes can fuck around in the regular season, and then all of a sudden they're back from the dead, and they're this juggernaut that you didn't really necessarily see them as in a few games, or even in a trend like performance like their away record has been showing them to be.
And Wiggins is coming back. Like
it's hard for me to bet against them until essentially I know they're dead in the ground. And the one concern I really have for the Kings is they have an amazing, I would say, game plan on offense where they have so many different talents at play here. Domantas Sabonis as the big post hub for playmaking and scoring in the post. De'Aaron Fox is a one-of-one athlete who has only gotten better at shooting, only gotten better at playmaking. They have spark plugs like Kevin Huerter and Malik Monk who can make shots on the perimeter. Like, I think they're an amazing, amazing offensive team with a really firm identity for a new configuration with a new coach. They are, I think, to put it kindly, they're terrible on defense.
Yeah.
And the issue what I'm really concerned about is the team that is most likely to really shred a bad defense is the one that has Stephen Curry running roughshod over them for 40 minutes a night.
Yeah.
And a team that may not be able to navigate the screen-setting hell that Steve Kerr and the Warriors put teams through. So my concern is I think the Kings can make it so that they can get to like 130 points, but if there's a team that I'm worried that I get to 132, it's the Warriors.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's my slight concern there, and which is why I think I'd keep the Warriors odds relatively high. But I think of all of the long shots, take the Kings.
Yeah, of all the long shots, take the Kings.
Light the beam.
Yeah, and that's also just for fun for the whole family to root for the Kings there as well.
Absolutely.
I don't see the Clippers.
I'm pretty. The
Cavs aren't deep enough. Like, they have some great young talent that's coming up, but it's not necessarily the team that I don't know. I think the Knicks are a better bet to win that series.
If we're looking at sample size in recent history, the Knicks, I understand why the Knicks are so far down because of the lack of playoff success and the expectations going into the 2021 playoffs relative to what actually happened against the Hawks. Like, I understand that. I think this team is significantly better, than that one.
Yeah.
I think this team
they have RJ Barrett essentially coming off the bench right now.
Right, and
they have the depth to actually run with these guys. And if Randall is coming back, I don't think the Cavs have a defensive answer for Randall. I mean, the Knicks are 3-1 against the Cavs in the season, and that was in large part due to the fact that you can't take breaks off with this Knicks team right now because the guys coming off the bench also can score. You have Emmanuel Quickly coming off the bench. Hartenstein has been an excellent presence physically in the paint,
and a glue guy to like actually kind of connect the dots on offense, which has been something the Knicks have like fundamentally missed for so many seasons. Just a guy who can make the right play when he's on the court.
Right.
And not turn the ball over, not make a stupid shot, not foul.
And they can move Grimes in. I mean, he's been starting, but he also has great perimeter defense. And then if Randall's not playing, like, Obi Toppin has been playing incredibly well, and that could give them enough of an opportunity to tread some water until Randall does come back. Although I do think he's going to start on Saturday. It'll have been like 2.5 weeks since his ankle.
Which is sort of the prognosis they gave 2 weeks ago. So obviously fingers crossed. But I was saying to you before the show, like, comparing the 2021 team and this team, like, there was I think Randall aside, there wasn't one player that was playing heavy minutes that was anywhere near as effective or as good as Jalen Brunson is on this current iteration. And I would even go so far as even to say it with Grimes or Quickly as well. And I mean this version of Quickly. Like, this version of Quickly is a better player than the 2021 version of Quickly. He is a far more efficient scorer. He makes smarter passes. And the other thing I was saying to you is, I was basically saying, even if potentially Randall's absent for one to maybe let's say 3 games, worst case scenario of the series, if RJ Barrett and Obi Toppin can fill the scoring gap without Randall, 20 to 30%, I think it could be enough if we get the best of Jalen Brunson, Quentin Grimes,
Mitchell Robinson.
Mitchell Robinson. Why am I forgetting of somebody I was just talking about? Did I say Jalen Brunson?
Yeah.
Oh,
I don't know who you're referring to.
Who was the other person I was just talking about? Jalen Brunson,
Quentin Grimes.
Oh,
Robinson, Emmanuel Quickly.
No, I think I was just talking. I was probably just talking about Brunson and Grimes. My brain. I'm sundowning. I think a little bit.
No, it's okay.
But also, I was saying too. The other thing I was thinking too is, in terms of even just like defensive acumen, playmaking acumen, those guys that were filling out the 2021 team were like Alec Burks and Evan Fournier, and Evan Fournier was relied upon to play like significant minutes.
He was starting.
He doesn't even have to play anymore.
He's on the bench, and that was a big, terrible contract that they gave him, but the Knicks are going to be able to clear that out soon.
So all that is to say, I
also
just think
the addition of Josh Hart is huge.
We were talking sort of about that draft that had the Zion draft. And
my favorite midseason Knicks acquisition, maybe. In
absolutely,
like 10 years.
We were talking about the Zion draft where the Knicks took RJ Barrett, and that Cam Reddish was in the top 10, and it's so interesting because like usually you could potentially a 1-for-1 trade like that could be kind of either a loser for both sides or like sort of like, it didn't really matter. It's sort of just flotsam, like kind of like bench filling out stuff for a team. Hart has been an extremely impactful presence on this team in terms of upping the intensity,
character, motor,
absolute
defense.
Energy. Just like
he's diving all around the floor when the games are meaningless.
Exactly, he's setting the tone.
Balls.
He's setting the tone for a team that has desperately needed a tone setter, has desperately needed somebody to dictate the pace, dictate the terms of what this team is supposed to be doing. So, and this is not to disparage the Cavs at all. This is a good team. Donovan Mitchell has been on a heater for the last few months.
I love Donovan Mitchell.
Jared Allen and Evan Mobley are the twin towers of that team. Mobley has only gotten better on offense. Karis LeVert is a reliable player. Darius Garland is one of the best point guards in the Eastern Conference. Right. This is a good team, but if you go on recency, the Knicks have been able to figure out the Cavs in the last few matchups they've had. Donovan Mitchell has, unfortunately, he's underperformed in the playoffs before. I'm not saying it's guaranteed, but it could happen again. I just think the Knicks are far, far more set up to be successful than they were when they really came out flat against the Hawks and could only win one playoff game.
I agree. This could be our fandom talking, and there is that always like that caveat, the fact that Thibodeau plays his guys into the ground during the regular season, and then teams 100%, teams that are doing more, load management, then it's a total shock to the
having
Knicks,
a larger rotation,
who have been playing the same way the whole year. But I don't know if that matchup holds as. I'm gonna say Knicks in 6. That's my guess. But in terms of who do we think? Okay, we've done we've kind of, I think, covered this pretty extensively. Right now, what's your NBA Finals matchup?
Oh my God, it's so hard.
I know, right? I kind of want to just go chalk, and say Nuggets Bucks, because that's the best I feel best about those two teams, and then having the Bucks win. Should I go
with like my heat check prediction or like my brain prediction?
Brain prediction, then heat check.
Okay, my brain prediction is it's probably, I think my brain prediction would be in line with yours, like take chalk, Bucks, Nuggets, easiest path, best teams. What I really think in my heart that will happen is Sixers Warriors.
You think Harden's gonna finally put it together in the playoffs?
I think this is the best team that both Joel Embiid and Harden have been on together.
I would take the Sixers above the Celtics to make it to the finals.
I think Embiid is playing his best basketball, and he's been the most consistent, even from last year. I think Harden has. I think they've kind of actually found their playmaking style together, and I think who they have around them and how they've been playing George Niang, DeAnthony Melton, Tyrese Maxey. If he can literally play 15% more defense, I think this is the best team that they have, and I think they're reversing the curse this year. I think the Doc Rivers curse goes away, the Harden curse goes away. The Sixers make the finals. And I can't bet against the Warriors until they're dead. I still think the Warriors are going to be in the finals, but I think the Sixers win.
I could see Warriors Nuggets Western Conference final. I could totally see that.
Which I think would be.
Although would that even physically be? That
is that
can't
possible?
Happen. That can't happen.
I could definitely see a Warriors Nuggets matchup in the sense like I could see the Warriors kind of
if they beat the Kings, I think they
Kings team.
Yeah, unless the 7 seed upsets Memphis, which could happen given what we've seen
going on there. Yeah,
so that could be a better.
But so you have Bucks Nuggets. Who would you say who wins in that?
I think the Bucks win. I'm like I don't know. Sometimes I feel like we're not reckoning with who Giannis is and what he provides for a team, and that he's the best player in the league.
No, it's a similar thing with him in terms of where you have a guy like him where if you basically mortgage like, okay, Giannis is probably going to score 40 points per game, something like that. Can we make it so that no one else on his team scores?
You can't.
And it's not nearly as easy as it used to be because Drew Holiday is playing the best basketball of his life.
Yep.
And Chris Middleton should be, getting back into season form. And even the rotational guys are exactly what they need. Grayson Allen, the pissant that he is a reliable defender and a reliable shooter. Same with Pat Connaughton. Same with Bobby Portis. Like all of these guys are literally designed to support Giannis.
Yeah.
And I guess the reason I say the Sixers is like if they meet each other, I really think the only guy who could go shot for shot with Giannis and be as unguardable is Embiid at full strength.
Right. Well, yeah.
So I would say Sixers Warriors. Sixers win.
Okay. All right.
Is
that your official prediction?
Yes, it's my official prediction.
Okay. Am I a loser for going with chalk?
I think
I'm looking at the fucking
I think
bracket and I just can't pick any other outcome right now.
I think both Bucks and Nuggets teams this year are better than anyone I think this Bucks team is potentially better than the championship team.
I agree.
I think this team is more complete, is more
and I would love to
see
Nuggets team
Nuggets team is better than any Jokic team that's made the playoffs.
Exactly.
I'm serious. Like I think so. I totally see where you're coming from. I think mine is more of I can't see myself betting against the Warriors yet, and I'm looking into the camera for this one because I'm serious. If this doesn't happen, I'm never doing this again. I'm never trusting the Philadelphia 76ers with anything else, and you can mark me on that. I've bet on them and I've rooted for them and I've supported them every year and they've always let me down. It's never again. If this doesn't work, guys, it's never happening again.
Put your money where your mouth is.
That's it. I will never predict that they go to the finals ever again.
All right, let's see what their conference winner odds are right here. I'm pulling it up on my phone. Conference winners. 76ers. Okay, the Bucks conference winner plus 125, Celtics plus 160. 76ers is at plus 475. Which is worse than the odds for the Warriors somehow, even though they have a better odds to win the championship. So I don't really know how that works. But you got to put your money where your mouth is. Put like $10 down on the 76ers to make it to the finals.
It's plus 475?
Yes.
Oh, that's fine. I'll do that.
Yeah, are you kidding me? That's good odds.
For sure. I'll do it.
All right. We don't encourage gambling on this program. We never would do that, okay? All right, well, that's all we have to say about that. Here we go. I mean, we'll be back talking about the results on next Monday. And
Absolutely.
We have the NHL playoffs starting. And it's very likely...
We're getting to the renaissance of the sports calendar very soon.
We might need to start doing some Thursday episodes.
I think once we get into the thick of some series, both NHL, NBA, OT will make its return.
I think so, too. I think, maybe as soon as next week. We'll have to see, even though it's hard for us to imagine doing more work, given what we're doing on the Majority Report, because it's like we're...
Just us.
It's just us.
It's been the ESVN duo for 8 days so far, I think, or whatever, 6 days. days, I guess.
Well,
5 days.
6
I've
or
lost track of
7
time.
work days.
7 work days.
No. 8 work
8
days.
work days.
Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then all of this week. It's
Right.
just us.
Will be 8 work days. Right.
Oh, I am so tired.
Right. Shadowboxing.
It's my birthday next week, so it's a great birthday.
We're rocking on the steps. We're rocking on the Philly steps, just up and down, up and down.
Up and down, up and down. All right. Now, I mean, that was over an hour dedicated to the NBA. How about that, baby?
How about that? You guys happy?
You happy?
We got to give the people what they want.
Now, this is what I want to discuss.
Oh.
My favorite player,
favorite
Giant.
This is big news. This is big football news and ESVN news specifically.
Odell Beckham Jr. to the Ravens for 1 year.
Love it. Absolutely love it.
I tweeted out that Logan Roy clip of him going, I fucking love it. Right? Speaking on the floor of ATN. That's how
harder, faster, leader.
Yeah. We're Pirates! We're Ravens! Like that's what this feels like to me. Look, this is all with the caveat that Lamar Jackson needs to return so I can see this happen in real life. Because
Well, to me, I'm curious. My thing is with this all is like, I know we don't know the deliberations behind the scenes, but for me, it's almost like, does OBJ do this without the assurance that he's coming back?
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, first of all, there's a lot to unpack here. One, Lamar tweeted out a photo of them FaceTiming right after this.
Right, and they were seen in Miami hanging out in the clubs together.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
last night?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Odell, Odell is a very charismatic leader, truly. Like,
oh, yeah.
He's been known to be a leader as a wide receiver in locker rooms. He was a leader on the Giants, especially in contrast to Eli Manning, who was derp face all the time and led in a different way, led by example.
Hey, man.
Not a vocal leader, right? Odell Beckham Jr. was, and I think that was some of the source of their conflict. Sometimes Odell was a little too passionate. There were some issues, but
there's probably a little bit of almost like a power struggle in the sense of like Odell wanted to assert himself, where Eli sort of like, like I won the Super Bowls. I've been here for longer. Like I imagine.
I honestly know almost for. I have heard rumblings that Odell Beckham Jr. was one of the most popular players in that locker room, except with Eli Manning. And
I feel like
they've mended fences, but I think they struggled a little bit with like who's leading this team right now. And Odell was really frustrated, especially when Eli's arm strength was precipitously declining. But putting that all aside, I just love this fit because one, Lamar and Odell, I've said publicly, like. You can find some tweets, I'm sure, about this. Like, my 2 favorite players who weren't on the Giants over the past few years.
Right.
And now they're teaming up. And it's just like, I'm thrilled for him because he gets to be a real wide receiver, one, even if the circumstances aren't perfect right now. 2, because it actually seems like this is a way to get Lamar back into the fold. And 3, because it's
absolutely.
a short-term deal and he can go back to the well next year and maybe even get an extension from the Ravens. And the Ravens have a great pro-player culture. As it goes in the NFL, the Ravens are one of the most pro-player organizations, which is why it's been a little baffling that Lamar hasn't been able to get this deal done. Although less baffling when you look at some of the details surrounding like how difficult it is to negotiate this kind of deal with someone who doesn't have an agent. But I love Odell as bait for Lamar, and they overpaid for him. Like, Odell, in terms of the AAV, it's 1 year. They overpaid for him
to $18
technically.
million.
I know, but even $15 million, probably for a guy with 2 ACL tears on that same knee, a lot of teams weren't going to do that, which is probably why he ran at this. This isn't. I thought he was going to go to the Chiefs for sure.
This is like,
he's sick of it. He did that with the Rams.
Right.
He wants to go somewhere where he makes some decent money as he cashes in at the end of his year. He's past 30 years old.
And I think we're also looking at this in terms of knowing that all of this right now as it stands is somewhat of a gamble. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of upside here in the sense of like, if Lamar does return to the fold as a result of this consideration, because let's be honest, this is far and away the most investment in a dynamic X factor in the pass catching side of things on the Ravens for in Lamar's entire tenure as a Baltimore Raven.
They needed to. That's why they overpaid.
Of course, 100%.
Receivers didn't want to come there because of the run-based system, and they got rid of Greg Roman.
And because of the the kind of the passing offense running through the tight ends too, sort of. It was.
That's why Hollywood Brown asked for out, and he went to Arizona. Good luck with that.
Oh, right, exactly. And why there was clear that there was some discontent amongst guys like Rashad Bateman in terms of how the wide receiver position was even being utilized in their scheme. So I think this is a show of faith. I think, of course, as you said, OBJ has a pretty extensive injury history. He'll be 30 in November. So it's not a guarantee that he's going to come out there and be 2013 Odell Beckham Jr. Sure. But I'm saying if this works out and if this is a fruitful pairing, this is two of the most electric athletes in the entire sport
on the same team,
forging a connection together on the field.
And people don't realize how good the Ravens were last year because they had to play a certain way when Tyler Huntley was in the game.
100%, absolutely.
The Ravens were a fumble at the goal line away from beating the Bengals, who went to the AFC Championship game. And they were playing with Tyler Huntley.
100%. They essentially had no business being that close in that game.
Yes.
And they were, because the team is sound enough to be there in a moment like that.
It's because of the culture that Jon Harbaugh has created, his system. I mean, they are just and the way that the Ravens draft and develop, they always get the strongest, baddest dudes out there and just go hard with it. And that's why I love the fact that they're bringing in Odell, because real football people, there's a reason that Bill Belichick has always been enamored with Odell Beckham Jr. too. Like, he is a football guy's guy and a football guy's receiver in many ways. And he brings star power, which I do think Lamar is going to be interested in teaming up with. This is a carrot for Lamar. So that's why they overpaid for him. So it's $15 million with incentives to go up to 18. And then it works out for Odell, where he can come back and maybe sign with the Giants in the following season.
And from your lips to God's ears, in the YouTube chat here, Derek R made this point that Todd Monken will help us immensely with the pass game.
That too.
Like, we're also operating in this mindset that if Lamar returns to the fold with OBJ here, and OBJ is, serviceable, and not just serviceable, I mean in terms of quality of play, but like can play, is on the field for a significant chunk of the season. It's not Greg Roman calling plays, developing the scheme. It's Todd Monken, the guy who just was the architect of the offense in college that hung 65 points on TCU and made a rushing quarterback out of 25-year-old Stetson Bennett. Like, this is
they are run based, though. I will say that he was run based in college,
totally,
with that Georgia offense.
But I think in terms of offensive scheming, I do feel like Monken can apply his philosophy to the personnel he has, because I feel like we've seen that. I'd
imagine they brought him in understanding you need to, like,
that's my
they weren't
that's
going
what
to
I'm
double
thinking.
down on
That's
the
what I'm
run-based
thinking.
Greg Roman thing.
I think if Todd Monken was hired, which of course he was, I'm saying it, but in terms of the deliberations, I'm thinking Harbaugh hired him knowing that he was probably saying to Monken, listen, we completely changed our offensive mindset and offensive philosophy when we transitioned from Joe Flacco to Lamar Jackson. Mm-hmm. And if this is how we're building this team, we're not just taking Georgia Todd Monken and putting him on the Baltimore Ravens.
Yep.
We're bringing your skill set and your philosophy and your mindset to apply to our team, not to take Georgia's offense and graph it onto the Ravens team.
To expand on his offense there.
Right.
And I want to respond also to another chat person, Wu-Tang Financial. Bill Belichick, famous for knowing good receivers, LOL. Bill Belichick actually can't draft and develop receivers, but he's been pretty good in free agency. You can look at his record.
Randy Moss.
He's good at getting
Julian Edelman, Wes Welker,
established receivers and bringing them into the fold. The problem is that he seems to not have really much patience for the young guys to develop them in his system.
If you've seen from some of his remarks through the years, the guy he loves the most, his white whale, which he has never been able to land in any way, is DeAndre Hopkins. Belichick loves DeAndre Hopkins.
Well, now he's saying that about DeAndre, but look up his comments about Odell Beckham Jr.
Oh, I'm sure. It kind of makes sense though, right? Like
Yes.
super athletic guys with basically webbed hands.
Yes.
Who can just
Who are
catch
smart.
any ball. Smart guys,
Yes.
cerebral guys. Like
Right.
it does make almost there's. I'm sure there's also the reason why he loved Randy Moss too, like or wanted Randy Moss on the Patriots is similar idea. Like
Right.
athletic freaks, glued hands basically for the ball. Like
Yeah.
I think he has a type in terms of who he likes philosophically, whether it's translated to who he drafts. N'Keal Harry, Tyquan Thornton. Like, yeah, no, agreed. but
Right. But regardless,
theory and practice are a different thing, I think.
Totally. The Ravens, I really think this is a good marriage for both sides, and I cannot wait to see Odell in Baltimore. My AFC mistress team gets my favorite Giants receiver, the greatest Giants receiver of all time. I don't think it's particularly close in terms of hardware. Yeah, you got to give it to Plaxico, but in terms of like season, there were 3 seasons of dominance. It's the most dominant season I've ever seen from a receiver, or I'll put it up there with, that Julio Jones season too, Justin Jefferson last year. I get it.
Oh, yeah.
One of the most dominant, I'll say. Greater than any other Giants receiver who doesn't, like, the team does not have a ton of great receivers in its history, but Odell certainly, I think, is. And so I'm just happy to see him on the Ravens. I really am.
No, I think it's one of those personnel decisions where I'm listening to things about football, talking about football, thinking about football year round, certainly, but I love when a personnel decision in April makes me like, oh yeah, I can't wait to see that. Five months in the future, still really excited for week 1. Like
I said that over the weekend. I was like, oh my god, I'm so excited for football season.
Yeah, it's like,
summer hasn't even
right.
happened.
We haven't even hit May. We haven't even hit the start of summer. I'm like, oh yeah, I can't wait for Labor Day weekend.
It's just because I can't even think about the I don't think that the Knicks have a real chance to win the championship, so I'm not that nervous about. I really want them to win the series though, but for the Rangers, I'm like having an avoidant anxiety about it. I don't even want to think about it.
I feel like I'm feeling similarly about the Devils as well, in the sense that it's because I've had a lot of with both the Knicks and the Devils is different because the Devils haven't. I think the Devils
they've been really bad for a while, but
the Devils last time
when you were alive, when we were growing up in Jersey,
the
Devils were the shit with Marty Brodeur.
And they won two Stanley Cups, with the last 20 years for sure.
Technically, the Rangers have won a cup in my lifetime, but I was like a few months old.
Right. Oh yeah, it was literally 94. Yeah. But for me with the Devils in the Knicks, it's been interesting where it's like I've been really excited, like, with the Knicks, like 2021. Even I'm saying recently, 2021, excited going into the first series, go down 4-1 to the Hawks, like, and then even with the Devils, like I think the last time they were in the playoffs was like maybe 2016 or 20. They got destroyed by the Lightning, so like that was like not even really like a glimmer. But now I'm like both of them are like good in a way where I'm like they feel better than they felt in a while. So I'm almost like. I feel like I'm bracing for like being disappointed again, where I'm like really excited and they just like shit the bed entirely.
Well,
that's what's hard for me to like get past.
Their future is so bright. The Knicks have kind of more. I mean, the Rangers have kind of. We'll get into hockey next week, especially if it's for people that don't realize. There's a good chance that Bradley and my team are facing off in the first.
Oh yeah. A very good.
Sure, that's the most likely outcome.
Totally,
it's not going to be set for a few days, but then we'll know for real. And
But at any rate, if I'm. Of course, like you said, we'll definitely get into this more next week. But like, I watched, David Pasternak's hat trick to get from 58 to 60 in their last game against the Flyers, and to get to 63 wins. And I'm just like, I'm really curious, and I sometimes feel hyperbolic about these things, but like, I actually don't know if a team can actually.
They're a buzzsaw.
I have really no idea if a team can actually beat them in the series or even be like competitive against them. They are like
I think the
really
Rangers
unstoppable
might be the only one
in terms of like styles. I think that makes sense actually.
But I don't know if they'll beat the Devils. The Devils are very good.
It's kind of like speed versus. It's like there's like speed youth versus skill and a little bit more vets. Experience. Yep. Like I mean, kid line aside, but I mean like.
We'll get into it. Cause
I'm excited though. I really am. Like I haven't been so excited for both hockey in basketball playoffs in a while, where I've not only been excited just to have it, but to also have sort of a vested interest where I feel like it's actually
Our
sort of
teams are in
real.
it. I mean,
Yeah,
it's as good as it gets.
totally.
Um, okay. So let's just talk briefly about this idea. I just wanted to throw out there. Do we have this Eckler clip here?
Yes. Oh yeah.
So uh, we've been covering this on the show, how Austin Eckler has been really vocal about the fact that he was, besides Herbert, by far the Chargers' most productive player last year, both in the pass catching role, in a red zone role, and in just as a traditional running back. And how the Chargers have apparently closed negotiations with him on another contract. Eckler was undrafted, so he has a pretty team-friendly contract. I'd imagine that, he hadn't made much money in his career. This contract comes to him, and he's gonna say, "I'll take whatever." This is much better than I was making as an undrafted player, and so now he's in a situation where he's coming towards the end. I think he's 27-ish, coming into the final year of his contract, and he doesn't have a second one. And what is told to him really is, hey, it's just the running back market. It's just the running back market. And that's true. Luckily, though, we're not free market fundamentalists here over at ESVN, and we believe that there can be tweaks to the market to correct grave injustices. But here's Austin Eckler on the ESPN Fantasy Football Podcast being really vocal about his contract situation, which I think is really helpful. And this is my suggestion, he should lead the league in striking as running backs next year until they get some sort of separate pool of money that actually pays them what they're worth and what they're creating for their team.
For me, it really doesn't come down to the logo. It really comes down to just really the commitment to having me in their long-term plans. Kind of got punched in the face when the Chargers basically said, "Hey, we don't want to talk about extensions anymore." This is the organization that I've continued to rise and hit new heights in, and continue to add more value. Right, scored the most touchdowns, from scrimmage, in the past 2 years, and so that's how I felt. Right, it felt like, wow, like this is like the first time in my career with them that I felt like kind of like disrespected by my own organization. And it sucks. Like I want to be a Charger, right? I want to be a Charger. I want to be there. And it sucks because it's like, okay, let's get something done. Yes, I do have one more year on my contract, absolutely. But, for them to want to allow me to go and be a free agent next year after playing, and, maybe we can get something done throughout the year. Who knows how it's going to play out, but just that's how I'm feeling right now, because we don't really have insight of what they're thinking, things like that. They're just like, nah, we don't want to talk anymore. So it is what it is. But as far as who I would want to play for, it's exactly what I said. Someone with a long-term goal in mind, who wants a guy that's going to come in. I can catch the ball, I can run the ball, I can score you a bunch of touchdowns. Like, I'm going to obviously, bring some leadership qualities. I'm a captain on the team of the Chargers. I'm bringing a bunch of energy. Like, there's a ton that comes with having me on your team. And so for me, I'm like, why would you not want that value for a little bit longer than just the next year out? And, that's a question that we're trying to find, if we can find someone that also wants that. So that's a scenario when it comes to actually, the partner. It's more so, like I said, a longer-term partner, not just 1 year out.
The problem with playing on the final year of your contract when you're playing such a physical position like running back is that it's always going to be in the back of your mind. I can't take this hit. I can't get in this situation because this could alter me forever in my career, and I could get injured. And that would mean that I wouldn't be able to get the payday that I deserve, and the value that I've created for the team will not be honored next year. I mean, and that's already happening. The Chargers have closed negotiations. They've essentially said, we're going to let you walk. But the anxiety that produces for a player, I don't think people get. It's just so much money on the line in the final year of their contract in a league that requires immense physicality. And this is Eckler's, honestly, I love that he's speaking out about this. Don't get me wrong. But he's in a better position than 95% of running backs in this league. A lot of them, this happens to them when they're coming out of college and they're on their rookie deal. They don't even have what Eckler has. Like Dameon Pierce right now, are they going to run him for 4 years into the ground on a third, fourth round contract where he's barely making any money? Again, this is supposed to set him up for the rest of his life, because this is the opportunity, their short window for them to cash in on their skill set. He's making like hundreds of thousands of dollars. What if he's not the same after 4 years, despite being this explosive athlete? He gets to his second contract. They're like, no, thanks. We'll let you walk. There needs to be a pool of funds. There's a few options here. And I'll let you weigh in this second.
Yeah.
A pool of funds for running backs. They need all of their contracts fully guaranteed. They need to have shorter contract lives coming out in the draft. There needs to be a higher threshold for pay for rookie contracts. These are just some of the solutions here. Because over the weekend, I mean, I'm dorky, but I was watching old highlights of some of the great runners in this game. I watched Adrian Peterson highlights. I watched Jamal Charles highlights. A little bit of Barry Sanders, although that's less applicable to like the modern game. LaDainian Tomlinson highlights. These are some of the great players in this game that changed the way the game is viewed, essentially. I mean, Jamal Charles was a fantasy juggernaut. You remember Jamal Charles on the Kansas City Chiefs?
Oh, yeah.
With Alex Smith? Because Alex Smith would check it down to him and he'd just go to the house. He was a juggernaut in fantasy football.
Yeah, he was awesome.
And
or even guys like further down, like Edgerrin James, well, he ain't even going further back, like, Barry Sanders when he was at his, Bo Jackson. Hold
on, I just want to make this point really quickly. The point is I was watching those guys, and they are such incredible players in the history of the game, and we need to create more of those. That's good for the game. If the NFL continues to go down this road, and they don't adjust the market, and they don't, which they have the ability to. This is not, again, use a Keynesian model as opposed to a Milton Friedman running back model. Get these guys more guaranteed money, because eventually kids who are growing up who are talented won't play running back. I mean, I'm sure that's already starting in college. And that means we won't have these incredible players who have been indelible to the history of the game. And last thing before I lose it. Running backs are arguably the most valuable position in fantasy football.
Yeah.
Fantasy football is huge for the NFL. They have ESPN shows related to fantasy. They have podcasts related to fantasy.
Matthew Berry exists.
Matthew Berry. The NFL has its own fantasy app. Don't use it because it's crap. Use Yahoo. But regardless, the NFL has one. They make money off of fantasy, and their most valuable fantasy players are running backs. What is wrong with this picture? You guys can't continue to exploit these players for their best years without paying them for their services when fantasy is such a lucrative part of the NFL. And it's a part of this DraftKings shit. It's a part of
no question.
I mean, daily fantasy is a huge thing. Why are these running backs not receiving adequate funds for the fruits of their labor? If fantasy is such a huge thing for the NFL, they need to compensate running backs better. And so running backs should go on strike. It's different than having the union negotiate on their behalf, because the union represents all players, including quarterbacks. That's why, it's not, their interests aren't fully aligned here, because they're on one end advocating for Lamar Jackson to get a fully guaranteed contract, which they have their own right to do that. I get it. They think that will elevate player value in the league more broadly. Does it elevate running backs? I don't think so, to continue to make quarterbacks the kingpins in terms of money they make relative to other positions. So I really just I rant over, but I really hope the running backs kind of organize on their own together.
I agree, because I think that we see this in every don't get me wrong, there is a expiration date for NFL players when it comes to every position, right? There's the toll that this game takes on your body, on players' bodies, is pretty non-discriminatory unless you're like a punter, kicker, or a long snapper. But the difference is the return on investment and the dividends that are paid as a result of what you put your body through. Mm-hmm. Even people on the sidelines who happen to be backup quarterbacks can hold a clipboard and end up with making money hand over fist, millions of dollars more than a running back who could be as productive, as successful, as impactful to a team's success, like a guy like Austin Eckler. the sweat equity is far, far less for a backup QB who might make more money. And like the first guy who comes to mind for me as an example of this is a guy like Chase Daniel, for example, not ever, basically never really having to play a snap, and because he's a quarterback, because he has a different skill set, can make millions and millions of dollars, retire with a pretty low amount of tread on his tires, and go get an analyst job as a result because he was a backup quarterback and he knows things and he sees things differently than other people see them because he's a QB. So
right.
And take that for the dog whistle that it might be, but then you have guys like Austin Eckler, an undrafted guy who's an incredibly impactful player, and getting closer and closer to 30. And what are his options? If as it stands now, running backs are probably the most fungible position group in the league. The franchise tag is extremely, extremely prohibitive in terms of the actual financial mobility it imparts to any player.
Yeah.
And it's far lower for that of a running back than it is for even a wide receiver, and especially for a quarterback. The financial options for these guys are so much more limited than basically any other position group. They do not have access because of how because of the market that is available now, and the idea that basically you can find a guy like Austin Eckler without drafting him in the top 20, without drafting him in the top 30. So why pay him?
Yeah.
If I can
that's why
find
you can't rely on the teams to do the right thing.
Exactly.
NFL needs to mandate
if I'm a GM, like, hey, Austin Eckler was at Western Colorado a few years ago. We picked him up off the scrap heap. He wasn't even a draft pick. We didn't even expend capital on him. Who's to say we can't find another guy at another school like that?
There is no incentive
Who's
for
to say
it?
we can't find James Robinson, another undrafted guy who went for an 1,000-yard season? That should not be justification to not pay these guys.
Yes, exactly.
They
That's
are
why the
still
NFL
valuable.
has to step in, and it can't just be what the GMs determine as value, because they're going to assign a value. They're doing their job to an extent. I mean,
I was even saying this with Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs had 2,000 all-purpose yards.
Yeah,
he was an all-pro player. He got the franchise tag for $10 million. A guy,
Saquon Barkley also did
a backup quarterback or a middling quarterback is worth more than that to their team. They're only worth more than that because of the position assigned to their name.
Exactly.
If you're actually looking at on-field production, it's not the case.
Yep.
And also, someone mentioned it in the chat as well, Bijan Robinson, the running back from Texas, is probably the best running back prospect since Saquon Barkley in 2012.
100%.
And he's probably Danny Kelly at The Ringer had him on his big board at one point as the 5th overall prospect. But he's not going to get anywhere close to that.
I doubt he goes in the top 20.
Exactly. And to an extent, you can understand in terms of the incentive structure for these front offices, they're not going to spend a top 20 pick on a running back. But is that Bijan Robinson's fault? Should he be penalized for the valuation of the position when, for the most part, he will probably be a super, super impactful player for whatever team decides to pick him? There's a disparity between what is essentially almost a punitive aspect to the players that they haven't signed up for.
Well, this is, again, this is not just about value to the team. This is about value to the league. Running backs provide immense value to the league because of the fantasy element alone. Pay them because of that. That's why the league has to step in. It's not on the teams who are trying to construct their roster with the best possible value. It's unrealistic to ask them to make a choice like this, which is why the league has to step in. So that's
every year there is a bigger slice of the pie for ownership groups in the NFL. The TV rights get bigger. The streaming rights get bigger. More as we were talking about last week, the flexing of Thursday Night Football, the streaming, the gambling, the fantasy. More and more of our screen on ESPN or Fox Sports, whatever, is creeping in with best lines against the spread, best over-unders, but all of that. All of this stuff is most likely serving to put more money in the pockets of owners. Mm-hmm. There's simply no way to justify continuing to flatten what these running backs, who, like you said, are absolutely without question a overwhelming net positive contribution to those very sources of revenue.
Yep, 100%.
There's no justification for it beyond just intentionally and artificially keeping those wages low.
Yep. We're gonna read some IMs that talk about Jon Rahm winning the Masters in a sec, but Alex in Twinsburg says this Cavs-Knicks series should be a really fun one. I'm a lifelong Cavs fan, so we'll be rooting for different outcomes, but these two teams are so fun to watch. Looking forward to the playoffs. Thank you, Alex. Can't wait. Will from Indiana. If the Knicks win the NBA Finals, then maybe it'll be enough to prevent Logan. Oh, no, I'm not saying this, Will, because some people haven't watched what you're referencing. 91 in Route 5. Another great example of people being overly concerned for property with the moralistic reason to drunk kids breaking stuff in stores after UConn won the national championship. Connecticut has much bigger things to be concerned about than windows and light poles, but still front page story a week later. Anyway, go Huskies. Yeah, I hear that. El Canipchion. By the way, Emma, I've been trying to call you guys for 6 weeks to pour cold water on the Knicks' chances of playoff success. I hope that streak will end today. No, we don't have enough time.
And I don't want that. Get out of here with
that. We are a warm water podcast. El Canipchion, don't forget to pick the winner of the second playing games. It's too complicated. We're just two people trying to do a show after doing another whole show earlier in the day. Antifa Lockhart, the Chicago Bulls of the United Center are going to win it all, and I'm going to bet on them and buy the team and then turn it into a leftist project with completely popcorn at home games. All right. PD Exorcist, the Harden curse is too strong. He's one of 3 players that, despite their talents, will never ever win a ring. Harden, Westbrook, and Paul George. If it's true, Sit's conspiracy. It's fact. It is crazy that Harden has made the playoffs every year of his career.
Every year. It's one of the longest, or maybe the longest. It's
like
in there.
16, 15 years.
Of postseason streak. Never won a championship.
Unreal. Wu-Tang Forever. Happy OBJ gets to play on our mutual AFC team. And not at the injury factory that is SoFi. Now work it out with L-Jack, and we got a real team. Hell yeah. Autodix. UT's mentioning last night's episode of Succession on MR earlier, and then again on ESVN. Any further thoughts? I feel too badly to say something about it because I think people are maybe I will say something like later in the week on MR, and we can talk about it, Bradley and myself. Clarence Thomas, the Titans' entire offensive scheme is give Derrick Henry the ball, and he isn't even the 3rd highest paid player on the team. Ryan Tannehill has no business getting paid 3 times as much as Derrick Henry. I know. Right? We need socialism for the running backs. All right, really quickly, we'll talk about the Masters because Jon Rahm is like a very rare, likable golf guy. I like Jon Rahm.
Oh yeah, I
was rooting for him, and when I saw it was him and Koepka, who is not a likable.
He's a joyless prick, actually.
Not a likable golf guy. Who were kind of the 2 leaders at the end of the penultimate day of the Masters, going into the final day. I was really pumped to see Jon Rahm come from behind and win, even though, like, Mickelson did have a great day, right? He crept up to, was he tied for 2nd when things ended on the leaderboard, Bradley?
Yes. He was tied for 2nd going into the clubhouse.
That's, I mean, him and Koepka, so 2 live golf guys, which is what
Mickelson being almost like the architect, one of the architects of the live golf to begin with.
Exactly, which is what was notable because the Masters was concerned, I think, that one of those 2 would end up winning. And what ended up happening was that Jon Rahm, the most outspoken critic of the LIV Golf Tour and the Saudi funded golf league, ended up victorious. So,
which was awesome.
Awesome.
A real like kind of fascinating meta narrative to what was happening at Augusta this weekend.
Because at the same time, it did undercut the whole we are the Masters and LIV Golf can't compete with us, when there were multiple guys in like the top 5 that were the LIV Golf people, or the narrative that had been pushed by some that it's a retirement home for washed up people. Like Mickelson and Koepka having that finish undercuts that. At the same time, the right guy won here. I like Jon Rahm a lot.
It's interesting because I don't think I necessarily realized, and I'm like someone who absolutely, I follow golf. I play myself. Like I genuinely like the sport. It's like
it's actually fun to watch. It's underratedly fun to watch. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but
no, in the sense like it is. It's like it's slow. It's kind of a silly game. Like it's almost like you're just like hitting a small ball into a hole. Like,
but you're cutting back and forth between personalities.
Yeah,
they don't
that's
keep
the thing.
On
I think
on one guy.
That's what I think is it makes it a fun experience is to watch all of the different players and what fates befall them. Especially too because it's an extremely unforgiving game in terms of the bounces that things can take both physically and metaphorically.
Right.
But I also just don't think I realized that with the LIV exclusivity, it only applied to PGA Tour events which are separate from Masters events. So it made that only, like you said, served to make it even more compelling that it was like also kind of a referendum on the choices these guys made and what could be almost used for purposes going forward. Like, see, like these two LIV golf guys were in it. Like this should be kind of a endorsement of what the LIV is building. And then Rahm took the carpet out from under Koepka and Phil and ultimately won it for the PGA.
Yeah. So look, the PGA is not an organization that has my sympathies a lot. I mean, I'm so not charmed by the every year, like, look how cheap our snacks are. Look how cheap our food is. It's
terrible.
Like, how much did it cost to get into the Masters? It's like, don't pat yourselves on the back for serving an egg sandwich for $250 when it costs $9,000 per ticket or whatever it is. So just give me a break.
Absolutely.
But it was a really good tournament, despite some of the weather issues, and I like Jon Rahm. I mean, I rooted for Tiger casually. I'm not a big golf person, but of course, like, his greatness can't be overstated. Jon Rahm might be the first guy that I actually like rooting for since Tiger Woods on the PGA Tour.
He's I think a really telegenic, charismatic guy. He's the fourth Spanish-born player to win the Masters. I think he's really like he's proud of his heritage. He's proud of the history of the PGA and of golf as what it is and as what it has been, as opposed to sort of like, he could certainly, given how talented he is, given how successful he's been, also take the money and run, like a lot of his contemporaries have with the LIV, and kind of get in bed. I'm not even saying necessarily, of course, that the PGA has necessarily more benevolent benefactors, or any American-based sports league does either. But I don't think that necessarily then justifies or absolves these players who have defected to the LIV to get in bed with Saudi Arabia and participate in their sports washing efforts either. So Rahm kind of being firm and standing up for that, I think, is pretty cool. And I think it bodes well for the sport that there are figures in a post-Tiger world that can still be entertaining and compelling once Woods inevitably does hang up the bag and stop playing.
Yeah, that was rough to see him so injured.
It's always exciting to see him back out there and to see maybe whether the magic can come back for a little bit. But he's almost 50 years old. His body has gone through a lot for the 25 years he's been playing professional golf.
And outside of that, the massive car accident that he was in.
And the massive car accident he was in, and also
the other car accident that he was in because
his wife ran him over. The personal issues that he's had. We've had a lot of
addiction. His body's been through.
I think I mentioned this to you before, but like, what's like. The other wild thing about him, because of course we had obviously a lot of discourse about the Williams sisters when King Richard came out, because of
we need a movie about the dad,
right? About the father who was like had what could seem to be borderlining on a mental illness of telegraphing his unborn children's tennis career.
Yeah.
But Tiger's dad went even further when they were like, when Tiger was young and on the junior circuit, like when he was like in his 14, 15 years old, and was clearly seen as like the next great golfer. There was one interview or a few interviews where newscasters were like, "Do you see your son as one of the greats?" And he basically said something along the lines of like, "He's the second coming of Christ."
Yeah.
And they were like, "I'm sorry, what?" And he was like, "No, I think he's literally Christ reborn." There's some it just goes to show you that some kids really, especially when you're an athlete and when you're that good, they just never have a normal one. Have a just a completely abnormal, strange life forever.
Well, not always, because sometimes, but yes, for the most
Just
part.
being in the limelight for that long,
Yes.
being that exposed personally for that long, I just cannot imagine what it does to you psychologically.
No, I mean, they have the Williams sisters, but Tiger Woods in particular, ultimate stage dad. Ultimate stage
100%,
dad.
100%.
And that screwed him up. And so that's why I have empathy for him, despite his his poor actions in his personal life.
Transgressions.
Yes.
His dalliances.
He clearly needed some sort of release. And he got a lot of it.
Yeah, sure thing. Yeah.
Lots of releases.
Yeah, no question.
And with different women.
Then his wife released the parking brake and started rolling down the driveway.
Oh my god.
Sorry, Tiger, if you're watching.
Yeah, dark. Anyway, guys, that is it. That's our show for today. YouTube.com/ESVN show. Subscribe if you're listening. Rate us 5 stars. Like the stream. Really appreciate you all. We will be back next week with our NHL playoff predictions and a bit of recon about what ended up happening with the play-in and the original, or the first few games of the actual playoffs. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.